Hi, everybody. I'm Kay Helm, and this is the Your Voice podcast. Find your voice, tell your story, change the world. Each week, I interview someone about the way in which they live or tell their story, and I hope you find each episode not only inspiring, but also helpful in a practical way. Today, I'm speaking with Michelle Discavage. Michelle is a writer, speaker, certified life purpose coach. She's the author of Unnamed Women of the Bible, Lessons of Value, Belonging, and Worth. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for being with us today. And Michelle, you and I met at the Launch Out conference in Tulsa earlier this year, and then we had a chance to hang out at the airport.
Yes.
And that
I disrupted your quiet lunch is what happened.
And I'm glad you did. It was fun talking to you, and I got to know you a little more, and I just really enjoyed talking with you. So when I was thinking about people to interview, I thought, that Michelle lady, yes, she would be a good
that
one.
Girl who just shows up.
That's right. Well, showing up, that's a big part of it, right?
Right.
So
definitely.
But what I really like too is you're inspiring but practical.
Thank you.
I kind of, because we both actually made it to our planes, so there's the practical part.
Right. I know. It's been fun. Now we're done.
Yes.
We're not going to be late.
Run. So you wrote this book, Unnamed Women of the Bible.
Yes.
And it's also a Bible study. Well, it is a Bible study.
Yes, it is.
So the book is a Bible study, but you have an online Bible study.
Yes, I do. It's some videos that I recorded just here in the house, and on one just started laughing hysterically. So very low key, very low maintenance, things like that, just to kind of go with that Bible study, just to get a little more in depth in some of the teaching of things that I didn't put in, or kind of I learned a little bit later. And there's even some more since then that I was like, oh, I may have to have a edition 2 of this study, but it's just something fun to do so people know who I am. So it's not just some random person they don't know, because I'm not a big name like so many others, like a Christine Kane, Beth Moore, all this stuff. Like, who is this chick from Texas doing this study? So it's just a way to bring some women in to start a conversation. So it actually that was fun to do. It was challenging, but a lot of fun to do as well.
Why do you write about the unnamed women?
Unnamed Women. Well, that one in particular started a few years ago. I was attending a Bible study and was asked to speak on a lesser known woman of the Bible. And a couple of us were actually asked, but a lot of people did not follow the assignment, which the rule follower in me was really angry. However, it worked well for me. So I was looking through 2 Kings chapter 4 and the widow with the jars of oil, and was just captivated by her story. And I was like, we don't know her name, but this story is so powerful. And then you keep reading, and there's another woman whose name we don't know. And I was like, oh my goodness, how many women are there whose names we don't know, but whose stories are in the Bible, who made a significant impact and a difference? And so it just kind of went from there to a series of blog posts. And I just really found myself connecting, of seeing how God was using these women that are not famous, or well known. We don't know their names at all, in fact, and how he used them for his glory. And as I started writing a little bit more, I just kind of thought, how many women feel unknown? How many women feel just hidden away, or like their lives don't matter, or they're not sure what their purpose is, and they're not sure what they're doing is making a difference, and was really drawn into that and just started connecting. And so it just went from there. And then one day my husband actually said, that would make a really good Bible study. And I had said nothing about it, but had been kind of playing with the idea. But many years ago, I was told, well, you write a blog. It'd probably be too hard for you to write a book. So that was the story I was told. So that's the story I believed. Oh, I can't write a book because I'm just a blog writer. And so when my husband said that, I thought, well, only one way to find out. Let's try. And so we did that. And I fell in love with these women and really started identifying with them and just saying, okay, God, even in the moments that I feel like no one notices, no one sees, no one hears, you always do. You always do. And that was so encouraging for me. So it was really just wanting to encourage other women to say, hey, even when you feel completely invisible, which I think happens all too often, especially as we get into family and different seasons of life.
Right.
But just to say, hey, there's someone always, always, always watching. There's someone who is hearing you, who is just madly in love with you, and just wanting to encourage women in that.
We find it hard to find ourselves in the Bible sometimes, in the biblical narrative. I think women sometimes are looking, well, I'm not sure I want to be like Martha, but I'm not really like Mary, and I'm not, we kind of go, the hero, we're not the hero, so we won't put ourselves in kind of this hero role, but you see really huge things that are happening as a result of what these women did.
Oh, definitely. And it's just also just to encourage others in their faith. It didn't have to be a big thing that they did. Like the woman in the widow in 2 Kings 4, she's trying to prevent her sons from being taken as slaves because they owed a debt. So she's protecting her family. I think we understand as women that idea of wanting to protect, and just feeling overwhelmed. What do we do? And just saying, okay, we do have abilities and gifts and skills that I think we have shelved for too long as well. And it's just saying, okay, women, step into the power and authority God has given you. That doesn't mean you trample over everybody else.
Right.
There's a lesson our world might need.
Yeah.
But we have such power, such authority, such giftings and such strengths. If we will just kind of stop listening to what other people are saying sometimes and just saying, okay, God, what is it you have for me in this moment, in this season, right here, right now? What would you have me do? And just running with that. Like, that's ultimately my goal, is to see women doing that.
Yeah. And we fall into the comparison trap too. We're comparing ourselves with, whether it's the named women of the Bible or whether it's the women on Pinterest. We're constantly not enough, or I'm just this, I'm just that, or, I'm being pulled in too many different directions. Maybe I'm listening to too many voices, that type of thing.
Right.
So how would you say somebody could get out of that comparison trap? What do you do? I
think one is just, and it's a little activity or homework assignment in the Bible study as well, is just writing down the lies we believe, because that's, I think, where comparison comes from, is because we believe a lie we have been told, and writing out that truth. And I actually did that for myself and have clients that I work with through life purpose coaching do this. And that's probably the most powerful thing, of saying, okay, I believe that I can't do this because I can't write a book because I just write a blog. That's a lie I believed. Well, the truth was, God was giving me a word to write and would provide the way for me to do that.
Right.
And that I would qualify, I just write a blog. Well, that doesn't disqualify me from being a writer. I was a writer. I just happened to only be writing on a blog at that time. And God was like, no, I'm calling you to do this. So if I'm calling you to it, then you can do it. So I think it's foundationally faith, knowing who we are, whose we are. There's so many disconnects there, but then really acknowledging the lies we believe and then countering them, because we have to replace those thoughts with something.
Right.
And so to replace it with the truth of what I'm believing isn't true, but here is the truth. God has called me. God has called me beautiful. God has called me his own. God has called me to an inheritance. God had just all those little things. And you can go through scripture, just a word, whatever, to counter that. But I think that's probably the most powerful thing to get out of that comparison, because even when I was writing this, someone said, oh, well, that's going to be hard because, like, Beth Moore, you're competing with Beth Moore and Christine Kane and Lisa Beebe, named all these people. And I said, I'm not competing with them. I'm not as popular. I don't expect to have the platform they do. They've been doing this for years.
Yeah.
And I'm just starting out. And so the women who need it, it will get in their hands. And it's gotten to women in India. It's gotten to a lady up in Washington State whom I've never even met, took it to a place in New Zealand or Australia, some remote place, to work with the women there. It's like, I don't even understand how that happened, except God said, you just do what I've asked you to do, and then I'll take care of the rest. And okay.
And he does that in his wonderful way. He takes care of all those things that we're concerned about that
Yes.
really we don't have any control over. You find that those are the things that kind of take up the time maybe that I could be spent writing. Instead I'm imagining all the reasons I shouldn't be doing the thing that's right in front of me to do.
Right. Like, here's pen, here's paper, get to work.
Yeah.
Start there.
Yeah. And actually though, writing, there's probably a lot of people sitting out there who are writing blogs or who have stopped and started blogs or thinking about a blog or something. And so that actually is a really good way to write a book. In fact, I have a standing challenge from my pastor who said, and it's been a long time ago that he said it, and it's one of those words that's kind of stirring again, said, write a blog, and if you write it faithfully for a year, you'll have a book at the end of the year.
Yep.
So there He's it right. is. It's just establishing really that discipline of putting pen to paper, like you said.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think we look at other people's finished products, and I could have easily gotten overwhelmed with looking at other people like Kelly Minter or Priscilla Schreier, all the studies they have done. Well, they're working with publishers, they're working with agents, they're working with professional editors, and said, okay, well, here's what my budget is. Here's what I'm going to do. And with what I'm given, I will do the best that I'm capable of doing. And then I'm just going to go, okay, God, whatever you want from here on out, and that's okay. And I think the platforms are fine. If that's what you're given, do it, steward it well. But if you're not, you still have a voice. You still have a story that should be shared in what form or fashion that takes. That's going to be different. And I think that's okay too. We don't all need to be on big stages with stadiums full of people.
Right.
I think sometimes we need to be face to face across the table from someone saying, I understand, or I see so much more for you than where your life is, those little things, but something in our own story to connect with someone else. I think there's such power and beauty in that if we'll just take the time to do it and stop making excuses for not doing it.
Right. Well, and even just with that scenario that you just said, really, yes, the Bible study can be pivotal in somebody's walk. There can be a life change that happens as a result of a Bible study, but it's also really, like we said at the very beginning, the relationship. Right. Think about who has impacted you in your life the most. It's the people that are speaking to you, that are kind of dropping these little nuggets of wisdom across the dinner table, or at an airport, or in those moments in the hallway or something. Those moments really where there's this transfer of wisdom and knowledge, maybe from one generation to another, or just from somebody who's walked a similar walk saying, hey, I've been there, you're going to make it.
Right.
That's actually a really powerful message.
Oh, definitely.
To share with somebody. You mentioned earlier about believing lies.
Yes.
And how destructive that is. And so, everybody has a story, but that story isn't always a true story. It's not always an accurate story. And a lot of times we're looking at other people and other people are telling our story. So what happens when we believe a story that's not truthful about ourselves? What's the result?
Chaos and frustration, to put it very simply. And I even spoke about this in Atlanta at the Launch Out conference there. That was the whole basis of my talk, was who will tell your story? Because I believed so many things other people said about me, that I was a tomboy, that I was too loud, that I was too quick-witted, that I was too intelligent, that I was too vocal and too honest and too opinionated, and just all these, just too much, I guess. So I started to try to pull back. So that's how I didn't want to make anyone uncomfortable. So I started to pull back, which there's a case for, just social awareness of we don't always need to be talking. So that's fine. But taken to the extreme where the enemy was just saying, I'm going to make you quiet. This girl who is willing to stand up, speak truth, and to be bold about that. I'm going to hold her back. And I did have to learn how to speak things in love because I could be kind of abrupt at times and still can be. But, there came a point where I was so frustrated and so did not like what was going on in my life that I remember looking at my own reflection and just started praying and started crying and just saying, God, if this is it, then I'm done because I'm so frustrated. I'm so angry all the time. And there was really a spirit of anger in me because what I was being told and what I felt inside were just at war with each other because they didn't match.
Right.
And I was choosing to believe what other people were saying and what the enemy used through other people and just the way my mind interpreted their words. Because I always heard, oh, well, how great my older sister is, which she actually is. But in my mind, I interpreted that as, and you are lesser than her,
Right.
which people may not have said. I did have a coach kind of allude to that, but she was mean. So I had all these stories, and I remember that day and just being frustrated and crying out, okay, God, what is it? Because if this is it, then I'm done. I'm done trying. I'm done doing all these things and getting nowhere. It's too frustrating. It's too hard. It's too painful. Like, I'm done.
Right.
And he just said, you're mine. You're mine, and I love you. That's all you need to know. And it was just this moment of just calm and peace and going, oh, like just in that one phrase, you're mine and I love you. It was stop trying to work for it. Stop striving. Stop trying to be all things to all people.
Yeah.
Just stop. Like, I'm God. He's not falling off his throne. He doesn't need me to help him stay there.
Right.
And just realizing that and going, okay. And he said, now we're going to change the story and you're going to start redoing it. And it's been 20 years since that moment and it's still being rewritten. And there's still some lies that I'm still overcoming. And I think that's going to be constant. And that's as long as you are working and trying to follow Christ leading in your life, there's going to be setbacks. There's going to be obstacles that are thrown at you. And that's kind of part of it. But just remembering who he is, I don't have to worry about who I am because I belong to him.
Right.
So the rest, it's icing on the cake, really, but there's so much of the power of our words. And that's such a big, big thing for me because of words that were spoken to me that destroyed me in many ways and really broke who I was as a person, that I have had to work really hard with the grace of God to overcome, and only by his grace have those been overcome. But so even with my daughter, very careful and very, very intentional with teaching her what you speak has power. So are you speaking life? Are you speaking death? And how are you speaking to your friends? How are you speaking to me and your father? And being very mindful of that. Like, that's a huge lesson in this house because I said, I don't want your words to be what keeps someone else from achieving the greatness in their life. And just saying we have that ability to prevent that in one another and saying, okay, what would God have you say? Those kinds of things. And so it's incredible. And as a parent, I completely fail at doing that well all the time and have to go back and sorry about that. Let's revisit this.
That's a big part of parenting, I think, in general, anyway. So
yes, I'm sorry. I messed that one up again. Let's go back. And, and there's beauty in that too, of saying there's forgiveness, because I've had to ask God to forgive me for not trusting him. Number one, for believing other people above him. And then saying, okay, help me to forgive these people who spoke such destruction in my life. And there are very specific people that come to mind when I think of that. And God says, you want me to forgive you, you need to forgive them. So you've got to let that go. And just saying, okay, we're going to let that go. We're going to forgive. And it's so freeing and so incredible. And then you go, okay, now we can move forward and do the next thing God has for me.
And I like the way you worded that in your introduction to the book. You said, grace helped me rewrite this story. And grace is just, it's one of those kind of words that you know, well, what really is it, but it is not earned.
No.
It is given. It's always something given. And we tend towards striving.
Yes.
And so, like the moment that you described with God when he said that you're his, that grace extended, truly life-changing.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so let's look back at the book Unnamed Women of the Bible. Which women did you pick and how did you pick them?
Oh, how did I pick them? That's a good question. I think I started with probably a Google search of unnamed women, like on Bible Gateway, something. It was something goofy and ridiculous like that. And then would ask my husband, because he's a genius and remembers things that he reads really well. So would ask him, okay, in scripture, where do you see? So just kind of went through, and it was actually going to be 6 women originally, but then themes were repeating.
Okay.
And I felt like I was writing the same thing and probably I got tired. So it ended up being 4. So just kind of, I may have gotten caught up in overwhelm. I'm not sure, but it ended up being just 4 women. And so the first 2 are out of 2 Kings chapter 4. Just back to back. And that's the one I spoke about, the widow and the jars of oil. And then the woman, they build a room for the prophet and her son dies and she's going. Anyway, go to 2 Kings 4. And then we had...
That's the Shunammite woman, right?
Yes.
Yes, I love that's actually one of my favorites.
Yes, it's so good. The wise woman of Abel. I love her. And she just, I picture her as this like really tough grandma. I don't know why, but that's what she looks like in my head. And then the woman in the Gospels that's healed of the issue of bleeding. And the more I wrote about them, the more they had grit. Like the Shunammite woman and the wise woman of Abel, actually all of them just had some gumption, I guess is a word for it, and just tenacity that I really, really liked, probably because that's part of my personality, but was very drawn to that. Like they took some risks, and, the Shunammite woman, when she jumps up on her horse to go find Elijah, and she says basically like, keep up with me or don't try to follow, like, I'm going too fast for you, buddy, because she's so on a mission, and just that determination and perseverance that they each had was just beautiful. So that's how they were chosen. And then just as I was reading and studying each one, the lessons that I saw God kind of pointing out kind of helped solidify, okay, this is what we're learning from each one of them. And a lot of it is just that tenacity that they had to just run after God, to just trust him at his word when it didn't make sense. Like, go take any jar, go ask your neighbors for some jars, and then this little bit of oil you're going to pour in, and it's going to be filled as long as there are jars coming, because that makes total sense. What?
Right, and she did it.
Yes, and she did. And had she brought more jars, those jars would have continued to be filled. They were not going to fill the ones they didn't bring. That's it. So they could have had even more than they already did had they continued to keep bringing. And so just learning, okay, our prayers, sometimes our lives are limited by the prayers that we won't pray. So what are we not praying? Just that boldness of it and things like that just kind of came out. And I think I went on a tangent. I'm not even sure I answered your question at this point. But so that's how the women were chosen, was just that tenacity and fire that they each had.
You just connected with them.
And then these lessons of, I mean, I truly did. But then I saw that in other women, like, how could this woman encourage other women, in this moment, in moments of grief, in moments of despair, in moments of, like, what is this? Is there going to be any hope? Those kinds of things, and just really seeing how God used them for those things. So that's how they were chosen.
If I want to change my story, where do I start?
At the beginning. I mean, that's where all stories start. And I think for me and a lot of women, we go back to the garden. So literally the beginning of saying, okay, where did Eve go wrong? And it was trusting a voice that was not God, not looking to the one she had been given to, who had actually received the command in the garden to say, hey, is this... Because I'm thinking, and we're not told, but I'm thinking something in Eve's spirit probably wasn't settled when the serpent was speaking to her. Like, something didn't, like, it sounded exciting, But something may have gone, not sure about that. We all have that little still voice that's like, hey, not so good for us. And so as she turned to Adam and said, hey, this is what he said. Is this true? Let's revisit this. It would have changed. So there are things in our own lives that we need to revisit. Choices we have made that we need to be held accountable for, that we need to maybe ask forgiveness, that we need to repent for, that, just whatever those situations are. And there are going to be situations in our story that were circumstances that stem from the choices of others. Mm-hmm. So we need to basically put that on trial. Okay, was that right or wrong? Determine that, predict a verdict or tell the verdict, and then convict it, forgive, let it go. And that's an example that a mentor gave me. It was just putting these things on trial.
Yeah, it's a good picture.
And I just love that image of, okay, was it right or wrong? Now, what's the verdict, and just laying down judgment and saying, no, that thing spoken to me was wrong, or that thing done to me was wrong. Then you have to forgive. Mm-hmm. And that's where most people are tripped up. And then go, okay, God, how are we going to use this for your glory? And I don't think we can forget things that have happened. I think that's a fallacy, and I think it's ridiculous, because those moments and those situations, even the very hard ones, are where we have learned and where we have grown. So to remember the lessons we've learned are important, even how to protect ourselves, how to keep ourselves safe, even if it's something like that. Mm-hmm. Or to say, this is where I trusted in myself more than I did my father. And I need to trust my father because he has been faithful. So I think it's those kinds of things, and how it happens for each person is going to be different. And that's beautiful and it's wonderful. So I can tell people what I did, or I can take someone through life coaching, to help them kind of rewrite their story or see what their story should kind of look like, get a better idea. But how each person does that is going to be different. But I think it's all rooted in faith. It's showered, overflowing with grace, totally. And then saying, okay, God, let's go forward now. Because we can't just stay where we have been. And I think that's a problem a lot of us have, is not taking that next step, go, okay, what's the next chapter? Let's turn that page. Now that we have taken care of those things, turn the page and start going. But it's understanding who we are according to Christ, not what everybody else has said, but what are our own gifts? Mm-hmm. What are our own strengths? What are our own passions? And then how do we see that manifesting in our lives, and how are we supposed to use those in our lives? And ultimately it's going to be to bring glory to his name, to know him and make him known. But what we each do is going to be different. And I love that fact. That's exciting to me and really fun. But so I think it's go back to the beginning, put things on trial that need to be on trial, walk away from that courtroom, go on to the next chapter. And that sounds such a simplified version of it, but those little steps I think can definitely be beneficial.
Just because it's simple doesn't mean it's not powerful.
Right.
And you think about a courtroom and a trial. Mm-hmm. From the outside, it looks like somebody went in a room, door shuts, they come back out. But behind those doors, such a battle can be raging. And it can go on. It can be very quick, or it can go on and on and on. Just like any trial, right? And
I think we get caught up in wanting it to be over really fast. And there's just been one instance in my own life of some words spoken to me by a relative that have just really gotten a hold of me. So it's almost weekly. I forgive. Like, are we done yet? And, something else. Yeah. But yet I'm asking God, okay, show me areas that there's still unforgiveness. Show me areas where there's still bitterness, or where there's anger, or, any of these things. And he is faithful to do that. I'm like, oh, I thought we were done with this. He says, no. Like, okay, we will refine this as many times, as often, and as deeply as it needs to be done, just to trust him to say, okay, I trust you with this process. And if this is what it means to go forward, then let's do it.
Yeah. And he sees the whole thing. He sees your story. He sees their story. and all the things that have affected both of you leading up into that moment,
Right.
and where things are. And, even though we're using kind of the trial metaphor, there really is more of a picture of a loving God, that showering of grace that you talked about, rather than this harsh kind of judge waiting to point something out wrong. We're not talking about that kind of courtroom.
No.
But one where
And
healing and restoration take place.
Oh, definitely. And as we're putting things on trial, I mean, we're ultimately the judge of those instances of was it right or wrong. And then grace comes in and says, but we don't have to keep these on permanent account. These can be expunged. This can be gone. And we still have to have proper boundaries. We still have to be wise about some relationships or circumstances, things like that. But it is definitely a picture to me of walking out of that courtroom, not to say, oh, I told you I was right. That's totally not the purpose. But to walk out changed and say, oh, I didn't need that burden in my life. That weight I've been carrying, that was never mine to begin with.
Yeah.
And going, oh, because we walk out the free person. It's not about other people or other circumstances or any of that. It's about us and us being changed and saying, oh, wow, that feels really good. To let that go, to forgive, to acknowledge things, because I think we so just sweep things under the rug, and that does not last. And just going, oh, I can let this go and it's okay. We get used to dysfunction to some degree. And so acknowledging that dysfunction we work and function in, to say there's a better way to do things. And that's just, it's amazing when that happens and we start to see that, oh, God never meant this for me. And I don't have to get down on myself. I don't have to burden myself with, oh, I messed up and oh, I'm a failure, all is lost. But just saying, he's so good to want me to continue on. To say, okay, you're going to learn from this. We're going to grow right here. That's kind of, it's just.
There's a verse that's kind of been rolling around in my head, and I'm really horrible with memorizing verses, but I think it's from one of the Thessalonians, and it talks about, hold fast to the one who promised is faithful. It is about him and who he is. Of set the marker. You are here. Here's your new start. Even if the new start has to come every morning. You woke up breathing today.
Or every hour, whatever.
You woke up breathing today, so there's a new start for you. So I actually, I was telling you before we started recording today that how much this study has resonated with me, just kind of where I'm at right now. And I actually have what I refer to now as the Journal of Lies, where I've started recognizing a thought pattern. So I'll need to do something or want to do something or feel like God wants me to do something, and I'll start towards that and hear that voice, well, you can't do that, or that won't work, or da-da-da-da-da. And it's strange because I'll at first react the way I always react, and then I think, well, wait, that's not right. Is that even true? Where did the thought come from? And so in the journal, that's what I'm doing. I'm writing down, here's this thought. I think it's coming from here, but it's a lot of exploring that's going on there.
Wow.
There's just so much potential there for change.
That's so powerful. Oh yeah. And then when that becomes a habit that we can easily recognize, oh, wait, that thought I'm having is not the truth. That's a lie. Watch out for a person who can identify the lies and replaces that with truth. And the more we put into practice identifying lies and to replace them with truth, because identifying them is definitely step one. But then if we don't replace them with truth, we are missing out on the true power. So when that becomes habitual and someone speaks something to us and we immediately say, that's not truth. And I know that because this is what Scripture says. This is what God has said about me. There is such power and significance in that. And watch out for the woman who will quickly identify the lies in her life. She will be very powerful. She will be extraordinary for the kingdom because she will not fall into those lies, because we fall into them so easily and so quickly because we have not disciplined ourselves to identify them. So when that's a habit, that's insane what can happen. And just a woman who will go out in the big things, in the small things, and she will do everything with excellence because she doesn't doubt who she is. She doesn't doubt God's calling on her life. She doesn't doubt the purpose he has given her. She knows who she is, and I love being around those kind of women of just, they have that solid, soft spoken confidence where you're like, that woman has it all together. And I don't know how, but I want to be like that, and I just kind of realize it's because a woman who knows who God is, who he has called her to be, that's that woman. And I actually had a client, I guess it was last year, and there was one particular area that she would drive by, and she had actually taken her daughters to a birthday party at this like townhomes or condos, something. And she said, I had to leave because of an anxiety attack, because of something that had happened years before. And so we were talking about this, and she said, I just couldn't even believe that it had such an effect on me. And I said, here's what I want you to do. And any good idea that is spoken during a life coaching session, I just give all credit to God because I am not this smart. So the Spirit was just saying, okay, tell her to do this one thing. And I said, go gather some rocks from that area and take them home and write either a scripture, a positive word, something on them, and then go back to that location, take a walk and pray and drop the rocks whenever you are led to recaption in your brain what that place is, because this traumatic event had happened. And so that's what she connected the place to. So the next week she called me and she was so excited. It was so funny just to hear the total change in her voice. And she said, I did what you told me to this weekend. And it was so liberating. It was so freeing because I've gone by there since. And that same tension, that same stress, I don't feel that anymore. She said, that's gone because what I remember are the words and the scriptures I wrote on those rocks. And I think that's a powerful visual and actually a physical activity that she was able to do to rewrite the story. And we have our own rocks that we need to write some different words on and drop for ourselves to kind of rewrite that narrative. But I loved that she actually did it. And she said, I don't mind being there now.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Because that old story is gone. Like we overcame that with truth. That's what truth does. It overcomes those lies. It defeats those lies. I mean, you can't have darkness when there is light. The core foundational beliefs of faith, I guess. And I think that's where it all starts, and a woman who's walking in the story God has for her is amazing. And that's ultimately my goal with the book that I've written, with life coaching, with the stuff that I write on my blog now, Facebook Lives. I mean, anything with the book that I'm preparing to write. It's wanting to see women walk in that freedom, to walk in their power and their authority that God has given us, that God has given every woman a certain power, a specific authority, and a very specific purpose. And to see each woman walk in that, that's what I want. Whether she comes to understand that through something I have done or not, it doesn't even matter to me. It is irrelevant to me how a woman gets there, as long as she gets there. Like, that's what I want to see, is women who can walk in these things, to walk and write her story as God has directed and given her to do, and encourage others to do the same. She doesn't belittle anybody else. She doesn't demean other people, but just has that solid confidence that she can be bold and speak out when she needs to, but she also knows when to be quiet, when to just wrap her arms around someone, and when to jump in and fight for somebody. Like, that's what I want to see happening. And so that's really the core of what I do. And really a lot of my messages that you'll kind of see weaving in is just wanting women to get to that place of freedom. And I want it for myself just as much, of saying that old narrative can be rewritten. We have the power to do it if we will believe that God will use all those things. And one other client that I had worked with, we were talking about some past circumstances, because we go through, it's called a grief map. So things that have caused a lot of pain in our lives. And just kind of, we were just talking through that. And she said, Michelle, I never realized that God was using the pain too. I knew he used the good and the breakthroughs, but I never understood that that pain had just as much of a purpose. And I was like, okay, we're done. Like, I'm good. If that's all you get from this, we are good. And she said, I don't see it the same because I see how I was changed in those things and because of those things and how God showed up for me. And so they're not as hard anymore. And I see the beauty of those things. And she had been through things that I cannot even fathom. And she said, I see the beauty of it and the purpose of it. And I never felt like I should share it because I didn't think it mattered. And I understand that it all matters. And so that's just incredible and wonderful and so exciting to be able to be a part of those moments. But whether it's through like my studies or someone else's, it so doesn't matter. It's all the working of God and what he does and what he brings to light and the fruit that he allows to grow, and just saying, okay, girls, come on.
Yeah.
Come on, we can do better than this.
And that's a powerful thing too, just even cheering one another on like that instead of tearing each other down. We did an activity at a women's conference at my church years ago where it was kind of billed as a scavenger hunt, and we divided up into teams, and we went around the property and did different things, but a lot of it were little group activities that we would do together. And one of them was to read the blessing of Mary over,
wow.
And you'd go down the line of all the women in your team and would just read this to them, look them in the eye and say this blessing over them. And it was, I don't know how it was with the other groups. I think everybody kind of had a similar experience. It was really powerful, but at the same time, what stood out to me was how hard it was to bless someone. And yet we throw insults and kind of these little remarks, and we tease and we poke at each other and we criticize, and that all seems to come very easily. You have to speak words of actual blessing over someone, which is so powerful. So how hard that actually came. We get not hard like we didn't want to do it, but we would kind of giggle and shuffle our feet through it, and we kind of felt silly doing it. Why did we feel silly doing this thing that was so powerful?
And I think something like that is we don't believe we are worthy of receiving it. So it's hard to speak what we don't feel we should receive. And that, again, is just a lie.
Yeah.
We are very, God is speaking these blessings in our lives. We're like, no, that's not for me. And he's like, really? Yeah, it is. And, that's oversimplified. But I think that is usually when we reveal a lot about ourselves and what we think we are worth in those moments. Because, I know women that would sit there with their hands open and wide and just love to hear that. And others are so uncomfortable, and it's because we believe the lie that we don't deserve that. But I love that you guys did that. That's so incredible because you're speaking that truth and that confirmation over one another, and that's crazy powerful.
Yeah, and if we could just weave that into our daily lives rather than have it be a special event or something, and that becomes, like you said, with raising your daughter, being intentional. How can we be intentional in blessing one another and speaking truth, in all of our relationships? That's world changing when we do that.
It definitely is. And I think as it becomes a habit for us individually, then that overflows in our lives to where we're going to speak truth into other people because that's what we are accustomed to. So we want to share that then, that becomes support out of us. And so I think that as we create those habits, other people are going to be affected by those, and it's going to be wonderful.
Yes.
That's a good thing, and someone, again, the woman who understands the truth about herself and understands the grace that she's been given and the mercy God has shown her, and just how redeeming our God is. She can receive that blessing. She can give that blessing unhindered.
Yes.
Unhindered. And that changes things completely.
You mentioned you were writing another book. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Ooh.
Yes, I am. It's a bigger content than the first one, but definitely speaks to the power and authority of women and where that gets twisted and why it got twisted, and why Jesus's interactions with women in the New Testament are so significant and were so purposeful. So it's exciting and overwhelming, all those things. Overwhelming when I'm believing the lies that I'm not equipped to do this, and exciting when I'm believing the truth of God is bringing you to do this, and we'll use it to free other women and to free some false ideas that we have as a society. And it's good. Oh, it's exciting.
That is exciting. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, thank you.
How much longer do we have to wait?
Oh, well, I only have the research and kind of information. I haven't actually taken that pen to paper like I'm telling everyone to do throughout this whole podcast. And, technical difficulties and all that we have faced today, that's life. You roll with it. You do what you can. You do the best you can. But needing to put pen to paper, have actually spoken to a few people of saying, okay, I need to be held accountable with this and I need to get to it. And there's always a reason why I can't sit down and write, but this is too significant not to. So it probably not till next fall, because I want to do things a little differently than I did with the first book. But I'll just put that out there.
All right.
By September of 2018. So now I've given myself a deadline. By September of next year.
There you go.
Is the goal.
All right. So we'll schedule you in for a repeat interview. Yes. We'll do part 2 with Michelle Discavage with her second book.
I can't wait. That alone is reason to get to work.
There you go. Michelle, thank you for being on the program this week. I think you've given us a lot of practical things. I know I have to apply it. I knew that when I opened the book. I said, this week's for me.
Thank you. It is.
And I'm sure I'm not the only one.
It has been a pleasure to be here and to do this today. And whatever God will do with this, I pray that it gives some women some practical steps, but also encourages them to stand up and take their rightful place as God's heirs.
Yes. Yes, and I agree. And I'm hoping the same thing for this podcast. So if it's the first time that you've ever heard this podcast, we're here to inspire you, but try to give you something practical you can do. Michelle has certainly done that today, and I know that I'm going to get back to my journal and start dealing with those lies and put them to trial. That's just a great picture. I really feel like I got something that I'm going to walk away from today. So I thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
This has been the Your Voice podcast. Find your voice. Tell your story, change the world. If you've enjoyed this today, I'd really appreciate it if you'd share it with some friends. And also, leave some feedback. iTunes is a great place to leave a review, or you can go over to the website at yourvoicepodcast.com and let me know what you think and what you'd like to hear. What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? And really just appreciate hearing from you. Thanks for listening.